So let's get started with the afternoon report. So we'll start with Jay's paper. I'll just apologize real quick. I have to duck out and teach class from 2 to 3, but I'll be back. I have theory class. So anyway, just if you see me ducking out. Okay, so here's Jay.
Okay, thank you. So for this panel, we are going to report public life, and I'm responsible for one aspect of public life in China. So my paper is entitled as Deriving Happiness from Making Society Better, Warring Gods of Activists in China. And why study activists in China? Who are they? They are human rights lawyers, labor activists, and commentators, public intellectuals, NGO entrepreneurs. They are not many actually in terms of number, but they do have influences in China. They are determined to pursue a good public life despite severe difficulties and high political risk in China. And then by so doing, they affect people's political attitudes and collective beliefs under the communist rule. So what do they do? I remember one quote from Dick's paper. Later he will present. For social workers in China, many of them thought their work is to make the government happy. And then for these activists, I think they would make the government unhappy because they try to enhance political reform and improve local governance in China. So for the human rights lawyers, they express support and provide legal defense in court for political dissidents and religious believers like Christians, Falun Gong, or Tibetans. And then for the labor activists, they give legal and protest advices to striking workers. And many NGO activists, they organize relief actions, environmental protections. And then for the commentators, intellectuals, they criticize corrupt government officials and policies. So for everything they have been doing, they do have their values, and then they derive their happiness from being an activist. But they don't really get high economic returns. They don't really make big money from that. And so in terms of economic returns or political returns, they don't really get status from being an activist. So they are not happy about that. And personally, their works may damage their family relationships and sometimes endanger their personal security. So they are not happy. But they are happy in one dimension, morally and socially, they are quite happy. They felt the reputation, the support from the crowds on the internet, from the Weibo, and they are happy about the support, the recognitions from friends or from the journalists from abroad. So they really are happy in some senses, but are not happy in terms of political risk or in terms of economic returns. But they don't really care about economic return, of sure. So what are the values they strive for? So I talked with them. Many of them are old friends, like labor activists in Guangdong and NGO entrepreneurs in Sichuan, and like one human rights lawyer, Teng Biao, he is now a visiting scholar at Harvard and NYU. So their values, I kind of put into analysis. They include, first, they do have a universal values of freedom, equality, and justice. And they have a very unique, common moral integrity value. Their ideals of intellectuals in China. They try to serve and speak out for the disadvantaged people, for the weak. And these values are what they identify with a happy public life in China. So if we compare with the West society, their values don't really include the democracy of competing political parties, which are very common values in Taiwan for Taiwanese activists. But my sense or my interviews reveal that this is not a common value in China. Even for human rights lawyers, their fundamental values is the equality, justice for the society. So I try to find out the sources of their values. The first one still is from the communist socialist ideology, which are deeply rooted in their minds since their childhood. So they talk about serving for the people. They talk about fighting against social injustice. And then the second source is, I would say, from traditional Chinese chivalry. They talk about 行侠仗义. They admire the kind of good people in the martial novels. So these people hold a strong sense of justice and willingness to help the weak. And then they do have some influences from the university. If they went to Beida or Zhongshan Daxue, they received some liberal teachers or friends' influences. For these core values, for them to be in this profession, to be activists, there are value conflicts with values from other spheres. These conflicts, for example, from the political spheres, some of the values in political sphere is to obey the government rule. And for the career sphere, we need to move ahead and earn more money. And for the family sphere, we need to provide safe environment for the family. These are all value conflicts these activists confront. So the first one is about the tension with family. So according to Chinese family values, a good man has to set his parents at ease, has to receive credit in society, and take care of wife and children, right? So the key concern for these activists, for their cautiousness, was to keep their families safe and unbothered. And for example, one of my interviewees, Teng Biao, he said, "It was only shortly after my father died that I became an enemy of the state. I feel really relieved, good, that he didn't live to see that." Okay, so this is a kind of a conflict between core value in this profession and the family values in China. And the second tension is from the work unit, from the employers. These activists, their work units or their professional job system are frequently part of the party-state system, like university, like the media, newspaper, or even some NGOs receiving government support. So in the process of living up to their ideals, they are confronted with institutional and systematic constraints. if these conflicts could not be resolved, the consequences were often to lose their jobs. So this is another very major tension. And then another tension is about the personal security. Actually, these activists don't wish to become martyrs. They manage to avoid two extreme clashes that would send them to jail. They want to keep active in society. However, they are very careful, but they continue to test the bottom line of state repression. They try to squeeze out small reform advances. So they don't really stick to the state rule, okay? They try to expand a little bit, but they want to keep themselves safe, keep themselves away from the risk of being sent to prison. So most of them have long been subject to state security surveillance, intimidation, and harassment for years. And many of them are familiar with the security agents who watch them, monitor them, and interview them. They used to have very frequent meetings, okay? The state agent would call them to have a meeting, to have a tea, and collect information. And it's a very common meetings between the security agents and these activists. So it's a continuous tension about personal security. And finally, surely, people need to make a living. And for these activists, if they have their own organizations, these NGO organizations usually have long relied on the financial support of foreign organizations, like Ford Foundations and Oxfam in the UK have long, actually they provide financial support to quite a few NGOs in China. And like the International Labor Union, International Labor Organization, provides financial support to labor NGOs in China. And besides, these activists still individually relied on their own ability to expand revenues. Some of them are involved in real estate business. They buy house and sell houses, and they make money to send their kid abroad to study, and so that they can feel at ease to realize their ideals. So the final remark is activists are caught between competing institutions in tension, just like various warring gods in different incompatible value spheres. And these values, including the activist core values and including the values of family, work, and career, they all have their Chinese characteristics. Actually, they are different from the concepts of individualism and civil rights in Western societies. So through these institutions in tension, I try to understand one aspect of pursuing happiness in private and public life in today's China. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you.